Mm. Some people say the moment you find out, time stops. They're wrong. Time doesn't stop. It rewinds, and suddenly every quiet dinner, every unanswered text, every "I'm just tired tonight" plays back in a different light entirely. My name is Marcus. I'm 43 years old. I own a mid-sized construction firm in Columbus, Ohio. I coached my son's Little League team 3 seasons in a row. I grill on Sundays. I remember anniversaries. I was also, for approximately 14 months, completely blind to what was happening inside my own house. I want to tell you what I found, what I did about it, and what was sitting on our kitchen table the night my wife came home from a work trip she had never actually taken. But first, let me tell you about the USB drive. My wife Claire had been an event planner for 11 years. Good at it, too. The kind of person clients called back because she remembered that the mother of the bride was allergic to peonies and that the groom's father only drank bourbon, never scotch. She had an eye for detail and a memory for people that I always admired, which is why, looking back, I should have noticed sooner that her detail-oriented mind had started applying itself to a second life. It started small, her phone face down on every surface, a new gym membership she never seemed to use, weekend vendor meetings that ran through dinner. I noticed. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself that successful women have busy schedules and that not everything is a red flag just because you're in a bad mood on a Tuesday. I told myself a lot of things. The actual moment of truth arrived on a Thursday evening in March. Claire was supposedly in Cincinnati for a corporate event setup, a 3-day job that had come in last minute. Our daughter Emma, who was 16 and sharp as a tack, had borrowed Claire's old laptop to finish a school project because her own computer was being repaired. I was in the kitchen when Emma came downstairs holding the laptop like it had burned her hands. She didn't say anything at first. She just stood there in the doorway in her soccer socks, her face doing something complicated that teenagers' faces rarely do, something that looked uncomfortably close to grief. "Dad," she said, "I need to show you something, and I need you to not freak out until I'm done." I turned off the stove. She set the laptop on the kitchen table and opened a folder she had found while saving her project. It wasn't hidden exactly. It was nested inside a folder labeled Client Archives 2022, which itself was inside a folder labeled Vendor Contacts. The kind of organization that looks boring enough that no one would ever click through it. Inside was a folder simply labeled D. Emma had opened it by mistake, seen enough to understand what it was, and then, this is the part that still gets me, she had sat upstairs alone for 45 minutes deciding whether to tell me. She told me. The folder contained photographs, a hotel room in what looked like Nashville, a restaurant I didn't recognize, a man I'd never seen before, tall, mid-40s, the kind of guy who looks like he golfs twice a week and considers himself interesting at dinner parties, and my wife. Smiling in a way I hadn't seen in a long time. There were also messages, screenshots, saved as image files, going back over a year. I looked at my daughter. She was watching me with this careful, steady expression, like she was prepared to catch me if I fell. "I'm okay," I said, which was not entirely true. "I know," she said, which meant she knew it wasn't true either. I closed the laptop. I told Emma I loved her and that she had done the right thing and that none of this was anything she needed to carry. I sent her upstairs. Then I sat at the kitchen table alone for a while, in the quiet listening to the refrigerator hum. I am not a man who makes decisions when he's angry. My father taught me that. He said anger is gasoline, useful for getting somewhere fast, but you don't want to be standing near it when it ignites. So I didn't call Claire. I didn't call the man in the photos. I didn't throw anything or drink too much or do any of the things that would have felt satisfying for about 20 minutes and then made everything worse. Instead, I called my brother-in-law, not Claire's brother, my sister's husband, David. He's a family law attorney in Cincinnati, and I knew he would be discreet, practical, and completely on my side without needing me to explain why. I told him what Emma had found. He was quiet for a moment. "Don't touch anything in the house," he said. "Don't move money. Don't confront her. Come see me tomorrow morning." I went to see him the next morning. What David told me over the next 2 hours reshaped the next 4 months of my life. Ohio is an equitable distribution state, which meant everything we'd built together, the house, my business accounts, the investment property we'd bought in 2019, would be divided based on what was fair, not necessarily equal. Claire hadn't worked full-time since our second child was born. She had rebuilt her event planning work gradually. But my construction firm was the foundation of everything we had. The man in the photos, David told me, was someone I needed to identify clearly before any legal action. Not for emotional reasons, for documentation. Courts don't care about affairs the way people think they do. But financial misconduct, money spent on an affair partner using marital funds, that was different. That mattered. So I started paying attention in a way I never had before. I won't pretend it didn't hurt, going through our shared accounts looking for anomalies while my wife texted me photos of revenue setups from a city she may or may not have actually been in. That specific combination of mundane and devastating is something I wouldn't wish on anyone. But I was careful, and I was thorough, and what I found, slowly, was a pattern. Over the previous 14 months, approximately $3,800 had left our joint account in increments that individually looked unremarkable. Dinners, a weekend hotel charge attributed to client entertainment, gas station purchases in towns Claire had never mentioned visiting. Taken separately, they meant nothing. Assembled in a spreadsheet with dates and cross-references, they told a very clear story. David connected me with a forensic accountant. I also, at his suggestion, hired a private investigator, a quiet woman named Patricia who wore cardigans and drove a beige Honda and had, according to David, never lost a documentation case. Patricia did her job efficiently and without drama. Within 3 weeks, she had confirmed the identity of the man in the photos. His name was Derek Holt. He was a sales director at a hospitality company that contracted with event planners, which was how he and Claire had met professionally 2 years prior. He was also married. His wife had no idea. Patricia handed me a folder. I took it home, sat in my truck in the driveway for about 10 minutes, and then went inside and put it in the filing cabinet in my home office, behind the folder labeled Auto Insurance 2021. I want to be honest with you about something. There were moments during those months when I almost stopped, when Claire would come home tired and make coffee and ask how the kids' week had been, and she would seem so completely normal, so exactly like the woman I had built a life with that I would stand in the kitchen doorway thinking, maybe I have this wrong. Maybe there's an explanation. Maybe the photographs and the hotel receipts and Patricia's 12 pages of documentation are somehow all part of a misunderstanding that Claire would clear up instantly if I just asked. I didn't ask, because I knew. And I think somewhere she knew that I knew. There was something careful in how she moved around the house that last month. A quality of performance to her normalcy, like she was working slightly harder than usual to seem relaxed. David had been preparing the divorce filing for 6 weeks by then. The financial documentation was complete. The forensic accountant had traced the marital funds. Patricia's report was signed and timestamped. Everything was in order. The only thing left was the conversation. I chose a Saturday 3 weeks ago. Claire had told me she'd be home from a site visit by 6 o'clock. I arranged for Emma and our younger son Tyler to spend the night at my sister's house. I told them I needed to have an important talk with their mother and that everything was going to be okay. Not perfect, but okay. And that I would explain everything properly when the time was right. Emma hugged me for a long time before she left. She didn't ask any questions. I spent that Saturday afternoon setting things up. On the kitchen table, I placed 3 items. The first was a manila envelope, thick, rubber banded shut, containing Patricia's full report, the financial documentation, and printed copies of the photographs from the folder labeled D. I had not touched these emotionally. They were evidence. I treated them like evidence. The second was Claire's wedding ring. Not mine, hers. I had found it 3 weeks earlier, not on her finger where it belonged, but in the inside pocket of her work bag while I was looking for a phone charger. She had been leaving the house each morning and replacing it on her finger before she walked in the door at night. A small, practiced ritual that told me everything I needed to know about how deliberate this had been. The third item was my laptop. Open, connected to the television in the living room via HDMI cable. The TV was on. Displayed across a 60-inch screen was a single image, a photograph of Claire and Derek Holt at a rooftop bar in Nashville, his arm around her shoulders, both of them holding glasses of wine. Time-stamped. Geotagged. Provided by Patricia. I then went upstairs, took a shower, put on a clean shirt, and came back downstairs to wait. She came home at 6:14. I heard her key in the lock, the particular sequence of sounds I had heard 10,000 times. Door, keys on the hook, the soft sound of her setting her bag down, then silence. The kind of silence that means someone has seen something that stopped them moving. I was in the kitchen. I didn't go to the doorway. I waited. She came in slowly. She looked at the table. She looked at the table. She looked at the television. She looked at me. I had thought about what I would say for weeks. I had practiced versions of it. Some angrier, some colder, one that I'm not proud of, that involved considerably more profanity than was useful. What actually came out was simpler than all of them. I know everything, I said. I've known for 4 months. Sit down. She didn't sit down immediately. She stood in the kitchen looking at the 3 things on the table with an expression I can only describe as a person watching a structure they built collapse in real time. Then she sat. I told her, methodically and without raising my voice, exactly what I knew and how I knew it. The folder on the laptop. The financial records. Patricia. The wedding ring in her work bag. Derek Holt's full name, employer, and wife's name. Yes, I knew about his wife too. I told her that David had already filed the divorce petition that morning and that she would receive her copy from the court within the week. Claire tried several things in the next 30 minutes. She tried crying. Real tears, I think. Though I was past the point where it mattered. She tried explaining that it hadn't meant anything, which I found genuinely impossible to reconcile with 14 months of documented behavior. She tried suggesting we consider counseling, which I want to acknowledge was at least a more coherent response than the ones that came before it. And then she went quiet. The envelope, I said. Open it. She had been avoiding it. She picked it up slowly, slid off the rubber band, and looked at what was inside. The photographs, the bank records, the spreadsheet, Patricia's report with her signature at the bottom. She put it down. She put her face in her hands. That's the copy for your attorney, I said. David has the originals. Here's what I want to say clearly, because this is the part of these stories that people always want to skip past. I was not happy in that moment. I want to be accurate about this, because I think there's a version of the story where the person telling it describes some kind of triumphant satisfaction, the scales balancing, justice arriving cleanly. That's not what it felt like. What it felt like was a door closing, a very heavy door on a very long hallway, and the sound it made was final and quiet and nothing like what I'd imagined. I stood up. I told Claire she could stay in the house while we worked through the process. I had already arranged to stay at David's, and that my priority was the kids and making sure this was handled properly and with as little additional damage as possible. She asked me if there was any chance. I thought about the folder labeled D. I thought about the wedding ring in the work bag. I thought about Emma standing in the kitchen doorway in her soccer socks, holding a laptop like it had burned her hands. No, I said, not because I don't remember who you used to be. Because I do, and that person would never have done this. I picked up my keys. I walked to the door. Behind me, I heard her start to cry again. Differently this time, a quieter, more private kind of grief that I think was finally real. And I want to tell you that I felt nothing, that I was past it, that I walked out with my head clear and my conscience clean. But I'm 43 years old and I had loved that woman for 16 years. So what I'll say instead is this. I kept walking. Not because it didn't hurt, because the kids deserved a father who kept walking. The divorce was finalized 11 weeks later. Equitable distribution, with the marital financial misconduct documented and acknowledged, resulted in an arrangement that David described as better than fair. I retained full ownership of the construction firm. Claire retained the house, offset against the documented fund withdrawals. We have joint legal custody of Emma and Tyler, with primary physical custody to me. Claire's travel schedule made that the practical choice, and she did not contest it. Derek Holt's wife, as it turned out, had already been in the process of hiring her own attorney. I don't know the details of what happened there. I hope she's all right. Emma is doing well. She started a new semester and made varsity soccer. She checks on me in a way that no 16-year-old should have to check on her father, and I keep telling her that the job of worrying about me belongs to me, not her. She nods politely and then checks on me again the next day. She is, in that way, exactly like her grandfather. Tyler is 11 and mostly concerned with whether I'll remember to buy the right brand of cereal. I find this extremely grounding. I still grill on Sundays. I want to leave you with the thing I keep coming back to. The thing a friend said to me the week after Claire and I separated, when I told him that the whole thing felt unresolved, like a story that hadn't quite ended. He said, "Maybe it doesn't end. Maybe it just changes into something you can carry." I've thought about that a lot. Because he's right that it doesn't end. Not cleanly. Not with a satisfying closing chord the way these stories sometimes seem to on the outside. There are still moments. Still mornings where the house is quiet and I make coffee for one, and something about that specific quiet is harder than the loud moments. But here's what I know. I didn't make decisions from anger. I didn't burn things down. I protected my kids. I documented everything. I let the process work. And on the other side of it, I'm still standing in my own kitchen, still coaching Little League, still the kind of man my father would recognize. That, I have decided, is enough. More than enough. If you've been through something like this, or you're in the middle of it right now, doing the math in the quiet hours when you're supposed to be sleeping, I want you to hear this. Keep walking. Not because it stops hurting. Because the people who need you are watching which direction you go. Thanks for being here with me today. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who might need to hear it. And I'll see you in the next one.